Welcome to Greenhouse. What is up, everyone that's in a house church, wherever you are? I bless you in the name of Jesus, especially all of you that are down in Tampa right now. Man, it has been cooking and heating up in Tampa. You guys are worshiping and making disciples, and the community is great. I can't wait to be invited down there at some point to come and see you guys for myself and hang out with you some. So God bless you guys today. Wherever you are, though, go to Mark chapter 12. We're jumping into a brand new series called Live Green. It's about the essentials of the faith and really the essentials of our church. But I'll kick it off like this. The first movie I ever watched that made a deep impact on me was Hotel Rwanda. And it was, of course, about the genocide that took place in the nation of Rwanda. And you've got the Hutus, the Tutsis that were there, and there was this just this great conflict that took place. Many people died. Very, very, very sad, very tragic. I was reading as I studied after that movie, I was reading about a Christian conference that took place in Africa where someone had done this call to say, we've got to go, convert people and get people to become Christians and all this. And a woman stood up and she came to the front and she went to go speak with the person that was running this whole thing. And she just looked at him straight in the eyes and she's like, listen, you guys came, the church came, and we have seen many people come to follow Jesus, to become these Christians. And they've turned to Jesus. And she was a Christian. And she said, listen, this is very, very good. But we have a problem that although we got people to become Christians, we never got them to become disciples of Jesus. And as a result of that, you had a genocide where you literally had Christians on one side fighting Christians and killing Christians on another side. And the results were seen in the movie Hotel Rwanda. It's not enough to make Christians. We have to go make disciples. She said, we actually have disciples of the Hutus and disciples of the Tutsis. We've got Christians that were Christian by name, but in function, they were actually disciples of the Hutus and Tutsis. And she said what we needed was to get Hutus and Tutsis to become disciples of Jesus Christ. Let me just start with my first thought today, which is this. You are being discipled. Everyone down in Tampa, I just want to get real clear. You already are being discipled. The question is, whose disciple are you? But you are a disciple. Make no mistake about it, you are a disciple. The reason we're doing this series is in Psalm 11:3 it says, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? This series is going to be a bit of a foundational series about the foundational nature of what is most important. When we describe living green, I'm going to get into that, but we're describing the foundational pillars of what it means to follow Jesus Christ. And what we're about, and central to what we do at Greenhouse is we make disciples. And I'm going to ask again, whose disciple are you? Because you are somebody's disciple. Now, I know that word kind of feels religious when we hear something like the word disciple, but you already are in the process of being discipled. Your children, if you've got kids, your kids are disciples. Your roommates, they are disciples. It might be under the radar, it might be unintentional, but rest assured, you and everyone you know is already being discipled in some way. In my opinion, one of the greatest breakthroughs in life comes when we start to recognize, acknowledge, and humble ourselves to the reality that someone has discipled me. And one of the breakthroughs comes when we realize and we're honest about the identity of those disciple makers. If you've got kids, they're getting discipled by cartoons and TikTok and things that they're watching online. We get discipled by music, by the coaches, writers, singers, social media influencers, celebrities. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're sarcastic, sometimes they tell it like it is, sometimes they're really culturally relevant. It could be all sorts of different things. But most of us, if we're honest, are a composite of a bunch of different disciple makers that have sort of put their shade or their color on us, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's Oprah. A lot of us are part dad, part mom, part uncle, part coach, part Grant Cardone, part Dave Ramsey, part Joel Osteen, and you fill in the blank on whoever your people are. My question to you is, whose disciple are you? Who's discipling your kids? Who's discipling your roommates? You're like, well, man, I'm not sure. You know what? I wouldn't even know what to do about that. Well, I remember when I was a kid, I was always running through the lens of like, man, what would my dad think right now? Like, my parents were divorced, but I was always obsessed with what would my dad think right now? In other words, when push came to shove, no matter what I said about anything else, I was filtering my decisions in my life through my dad. Maybe you're buying a house, or maybe you're doing something on your house and you're putting together a kitchen, and in your mind you're like, ooh, I wonder what Terry would think about this. I wonder what Billy would think about this. And when you're putting your house together, you're filtering your house through that. Or when you buy a car, that's giving you some idea of who you have in mind in your real life. When you post something on social media, there are probably some people you could care less about what they say. Fundamental to discipleship is it's this filter through which your life goes. When I was just becoming a dad, I remember at one point I was looking for my shoes one day and I couldn't find my shoes, and I'm like, man, where's my? I'm looking and looking and looking, and sure enough, I went into one of my kids' rooms, and one of my sons just loved to put on his daddy's big shoes, and he would walk those around the house, and he had fallen asleep in my shoes in his little bed that was kind of on the ground, like this little trundle that was underneath the bunk bed, and here he is sleeping with his feet in there, and I wish I had a picture of my son who wanted to walk in my shoes. The question is not if you're a disciple. The question is, whose disciple are you? Whose shoes are you trying to walk in? Because at Greenhouse, we're trying to get people to walk in the discipleship shoes of Jesus. Our dream is to have a movement of people that are honest about the fact that we have been defined by whatever tribes, Hutus, Tutsis, Republicans, Democrats, white, black, Hispanic, yellow, whatever, all the different tribes that we come from. Absolutely, we have been influenced by all of that. We've been influenced by Ellen, and we've been influenced by, whoever you listen to on the radio. But people that are most defined by the fact that we run our lives through the filter of Jesus, to become disciples of Jesus. And that leads me to today's passage in Mark chapter 12, because in reality what a disciple was somebody that it's something like a student because they learn the information, but it's more than a student because disciples wanted to be transformed, not just informed, transformed into the image of their teacher that they would call a rabbi. In fact, if you've watched the show The Chosen, you'll see they called Jesus rabbi, because a disciple would go with a rabbi, and a disciple would take what was called the yoke of a rabbi. And a lot of times that yoke meant it was the interpretation of God's laws, but it was also that person's manner. And that's why I'm going to read you from now in Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 28. And that's really the essence and the kickoff of this series, where it says, one of the scribes came up, and they heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he answered them well, he had just answered the Sadducees, he said, which commandment is the most important of all? Now, this was a very common question. This was a very typical question that Jews were actually asking. It was a question they would ask rabbis. It would let you know something about that rabbi's yoke. So if you remember where Jesus said, take my yoke upon me, it wasn't just a general term. That was a term that was a very spiritual term that people used of who they were going to follow. Well, this is his yoke. He's now giving us his interpretation, his yoke, his way, his truth, his life. Jesus answered, the most important is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is like it. The second is just like this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that here he is one, and that there is no one beside him. And to love the Lord with all of our heart, all of our understanding, all of our strength, and to love one's neighbor as ourselves is much more than the whole burnt offering and all the sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And after this, no one dared ask him any more questions. Now, as I'm jumping into this, I just want to point out real fast, why would no one dare? It's almost like they're like, oh my gosh, when he just said what he said, they're like, their hearts are beating. No one dared ask him any more questions. It's like this was intense. The reason I'm pointing that out is because I often hear Christians or religious people say, when they hear this passage, they're like, oh yeah. Love God, love people. Yeah. And we kind of start to roll our eyes like it's some kind of a junior varsity low-level thought. And yet, why would the hearers of Jesus hear this and it stopped their mouths? Because apparently they were hearing something we don't hear. And that's really what I'm kind of hoping that we do get here when we're reading this. Now, we are going to get this, and I want to make this clear. Jesus is saying when they're asking him, what's the most important of all of it? What's your yoke? He says, number one, love God with all. Could everyone just say all? Love God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul, all of your insides, all of your being, all of your strength, and love your neighbor as. It's love God with all, it's love your neighbor as. And at Greenhouse, some of you may know this, that we consider loving God as, we kind of pick the color yellow. We take that as like a yellow, like this royal yellow. Loving God we represent with yellow, and loving people we represent with blue. When you love God and you love people, that's the commands that Jesus put. We take yellow and blue. If you take yellow and blue, you put them together, you get green. And when you love God and you love people, you get disciples. By the way, that's where we get the name Greenhouse from, if you're kind of new around here. So first thought I want to let you know is you are being discipled by someone. The second thought I want to let you know is disciples of Jesus live green. And that's this series, Live Green. In fact, why don't you turn to someone right now and just say, live green. Verde. Live green. Jesus is making this simple, and the reality was the rabbis, the scholars had come up with about 613 specific laws that were in the Torah, in the Old Testament. And when they did this, they were interested because people were trying to figure out if you're, out of all these distinguishable rules, which one is the most important. And there were 10 commandments, for example. It was a very common question to say, and people might say, well, the most important commandment is the first one, or some people would say it's honoring your mother and father, and there was these different ideas that they had. So many people would have expected something like, okay, Jesus is going to pick one of the 10, or the first of the 10. But it's kind of interesting because he chooses two places from the Torah. One is in Deuteronomy 6, one is in Leviticus 19. Deuteronomy 6 says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and Leviticus 19 says, love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus goes and he picks these two passages and he says, this is the essence. This is when you boil it all down. Don't miss this. Now, just so we're clear, we humans are very prone to missing the point. A little while back, I was doing something and I wanted to go to the gym, or I wanted to go out and play some sports with some friends or whatever. And I went to my wife and I was like, hey, honey, are you cool if I go out and do that? And she's like, it'd be great if you were around here. I'm like, yeah, but I want to get some exercise, and you and me could maybe, we could hang out later or whatever. And then she looks at me, she says, do whatever you want. I said, well, okay. Well, what I would like to do is I'd like to go play some sports. So I went out and I played some sports. When I got home a little bit later than I was thinking that I would, and very sweaty and very happy because I kind of had my way, when I came home, it became very clear with the look on her face that I had missed the point of what was supposed to be happening in that transaction in that moment. Because in that moment, I wasn't pleasing my wife, I was pleasing me. And I think what happens when we're reading this passage is Jesus is letting us know it's actually easy to miss the point. When Jesus says, yes, there are 613 laws, but please don't miss this. If you boil it all down, it's love the Lord your God with all. Like love the Lord with all. Love God and love people as you love yourself. But when you're doing this, it's the idea that you'll never actually keep those 613 laws unless you're actually loving people. Let me break this down. There was a command that said, don't bear false witness. There was a command that said to not lie, right? But the truth is, you and me both know it's possible to technically tell the truth, but you've withheld information from somebody in a way that you didn't break a rule, but you did not love the person. And what Jesus is saying is that the essence of the law that says, do not bear false witness, it was actually not that not just that you're not untruthful, like not just that you are false, but that you're loving. In fact, let me say it differently. Jesus is saying the point of all of it, because his very nature is love. God is love itself. That God is love. That God's point was that God wrote laws, like the 10 Commandments were written to illustrate what it looks like in the real world for humans to love God and for humans to love people. Now, we like to think of the yellow. We call, in general, I would say this, that our call is to love God, it's to love Jesus, it's to love the world, and it's to love one another. We take the yellow and we call that worship, and I would sort of describe worship as loving and obeying Jesus with all of your life. We would take the blue, and we would call that first blue, we would call that mission. And what we describe as mission is that's where I would say we are loving those who do not follow Jesus. And I want to get real clear about this. We love them with courage and dignity. That means we're bold about who we believe in, Jesus, but we treat other people with dignity, which means we can never look down on someone. We cannot look down on someone that's of another religion. There are Muslims that are more virtuous than I am in many, many ways. And there are Buddhists that just have great virtue and things that they do, and honesty, and just people of integrity. And so it means that I'm going to love God, and I'm going to love and obey Jesus with my life. I'm going to love people by being courageous about my witness toward God, but also treating them with dignity. But then the other blue is community, and that's where we love each other intentionally and transparently, like authentically. So we love Jesus, we love the world, and we love each other. That's what it means to come into to live green. Living green is to live a life of loving God and loving people, of worship, of mission, and community. But it's very important that we get the terms right, because when we're saying something like love, the reason you and me roll our eyes when we hear love God, love people is because for you and me, love has been dumbed down to a 21st century sentiment instead of a first century hardcore 1 Corinthians 13 kind of thing. And I'm going to read it to you right now, actually. In 1 Corinthians 13, God's definition of love goes like this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It isn't arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't insist on its own way, like going out to work out when someone doesn't want you to. It doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing. It rejoices with the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. Endures all things. So I flipped on, social media the other day, and someone said, if you have hope right now, then you are ridiculous. You cannot have hope in this world. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And then someone's like, I will not tolerate. And I was listening to all the I will not tolerate, I will not hope, I will not bear, I insist on my way. And I'm like, all of that was natural, and all of it even made sense. And they were getting all these likes on social media, but it was real clear, according to the Bible, what it was not is love. Whatever Jesus meant when he said, love the Lord your God, it's like this. You ever had someone call you, like doing a cold sales call? I had someone calling me doing this cold sales call. And this happened to me so many different times. And immediately, hey, my friend, and how's your day? And how are you doing? And tell me about your family, and how many kids you have. And, they give you all the stuff. And man, we were best buds. We were all this. We were friends. We were friends until, can you guess? Until I wasn't going to buy what they were selling. And as soon as I wasn't going to buy what they were selling, when I sort of asked them some question, they literally had tricked me into, I really was kind of believing for a minute, hey, we were kind of like hitting it off, like we were friends here. But we weren't friends at all. The person wasn't looking for my benefit. And that's what love is. Love is when you want the good of the other. It's when you want what's good you love God when you want what's good for God. You love people when you want what's good for people. And you trust God that it will turn out good for you, but you love God by longing for and moving toward what is good for God. And for people, and what's on your mind is what would be good for this person. So this week we have a summer internship going on at Greenhouse right now, and this week one of our staff on Helica was doing a session, and she had formerly worked at one of the colleges here in town, and she brought over some people that she knew from Santa Fe College. And so one of them was like a Muslim from the Middle East. One of them was, I think, someone that was maybe Catholic. One of them was a Christian. But anyway, they were all of them were from other places and whatnot. But they were allowed to kind of share their heart, their perspective, and their experiences. And so I was talking to them after they had done this little presentation and done this little time, this sharing time with our interns. And it was just really kind of beautiful. But one of the young ladies, she had just really been touched when one of the interns raised their hand and just asked a question that was something like, what could we do that would help you feel loved? Where you would know that you are cared for, that you're loved, that you're not just a project, that you're genuinely loved. And it really, really touched her as someone that's been afraid at times, as someone that, kind of wonders, like, I wonder what everyone thinks about, someone that's a Muslim immigrant in America. Like, oh my gosh, what are these people going to think about me? But I need you to know is this: disciples are asking that question. Disciples live green, and to live green means you love God and you love the world and we love each other by striving for and living for what would be best for them. So I want to ask you again, whose disciple are you? Because you're someone's disciple. But number two, not just whose disciple are you, but disciples, they live green. But I want to end it with this, because it is important that Jesus says the first commandment is the first command. It's going to start with this one. The most important is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with all. We're going to have some more weeks. I'm going to talk about worship, and we'll talk about community. But right now, I need you to know that green, if you're going to live in the green, if you're going to live green, green starts with yellow. It's first things first. You got to get the first one first. There were 10 commandments that God gave, but it's been pointed out many times that out of the 10 commandments, you never break commandment 2 through 10 until you have first broken commandment number 1. That first command to honor God, to have no other gods. The first command is the first priority. And humans, we've always known, when you read the history of humanity, humans have always known there's a God, but we've always had a problem with God wanting to be God just because He is. Like we've always had we're not happy about the fact that He gets to be God just because He is. And the reality is many of us have really wanted to be God. I was reading something from the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the historian titled it Not God, interestingly. The history of Alcoholics Anonymous was titled Not God, because he said that stands as the most important hurdle that an addicted person must surmount, to acknowledge deep in the soul not being God. That you're not God. There's no mastery of manipulation and control at which alcoholics tend to excel that can overcome the root problem that all of us at some level want to be God. They just found you could not get past this alcohol mountain until you were willing to confess and admit and to say, I am not God. Rather, the alcoholic must recognize the individual helplessness and fall back in the arms of what, of course, they call the higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous. They said this, quote, first of all, we had to quit playing God and then allow God to be God. That's the beginning of freedom for alcoholics, and that's the beginning of freedom from you and me. And friends, that is the beginning of the freedom for this world, is when we will let God be God. You are being discipled. Disciples of Jesus, they live green, but green starts with yellow. It's got to start by loving the Lord. It starts by God being first. That's why when I get up in the mornings, honestly, I begin my days with God. When I get paid, the first thing I do is I give it back to God. I try when I'm starting a new endeavor to have the first thing that I do to acknowledge the Lord in all of our ways. Yellow is the starting point for green. Green, yellow and blue makes green, but the starting place is yellow. So what's the application of this sermon today? It's simply this. If you're not already following Jesus, I want you to decide today to actually live green. I'd like you to sign up to make the green commitment. In fact, there's a QR code that you're going to see that you can even take out your phone, and you can click on this thing, and you could basically make a commitment that would say, you know what, I'm sure I'm not perfect yet, but I'm giving my life, I'm committing my life to, number one, worship God. And there's those commitments that are there. I'm going to seek the Lord. I'm going to pray, get into the scriptures and things like that. Number two, I'm going to get on mission. I'm going to love this world. And then number three, I'm going to live in community. I'm going to help love one another. And if you'd be willing to do that, I want you to take out your phone, click on that thing, and that would just be wonderful. I'm imagining what would happen if everyone that's in Tampa, if everyone that's with the Series right now, with everyone that's in each one of these house churches, wherever you're at right now, whether you're in a facility where you're living or if you're in a home by yourself watching this right now, can you imagine what would happen if all of us became people that decided to follow Jesus? because Jesus came to turn this world upside down. In fact, let me just make this clear. The day of evil is going to come to an end. There is a day when every dictator is going to be overturned, where all oppression is going to cease, where all the wickedness is going to be done, where the destruction of this earth and the people in it is going to come to a halt. There is a day when that's going to happen. There is a day that's coming because Jesus came to turn this world upside down in the best kind of way. And when you follow Jesus, you're following Jesus in that. And Jesus hears the cries of the oppressed. And Jesus feels the pain of the exploited. And Jesus knows, he knows what it feels like to be the victim. He knows what that is. He agonizes with our poverty, and he is near to the brokenhearted. And what is he doing about it now? He's sending disciples to go be his representatives that are just like him, loving this world, loving God, loving this world, loving each other, and turning the world upside down. I end it like this. In Jesus' day, every rabbi would go and they would make their case. And much like if you're trying to get into the University of Florida, like right now, we have a lot of people that I know very closely that were very upset, very sad when they applied and they did not get accepted into the University of Florida. They chose UF, but UF did not choose them. That's how many rabbis were. And so someone would get to choose to follow Rabbi Hillel, or they get to follow this other rabbi. Jesus was unique when he came and he goes to this group of fishermen and nobodies, and he says, "You did not choose me, but I've chosen you. Peter, come follow me. Andrew, follow me. John, follow me." And right now, in some way, he's saying that to you. Will you come follow me? Be my child. I love you. I love you. I've given myself for you. I shed my blood for you, is what he would say. He rose from the dead, and now he's calling us to follow. To follow in worship and mission and community, but to say yes. It's the flip. He's like the only rabbi ever that came and he's choosing them. Nobody's. Low potential people in the world's eyes, and yet he chose them. And he who the Lord has chosen and she who the Lord has chosen will never be the same if they say yes. So will you say yes? And if you will, let's go live green and let's go turn this world upside down. Christine, come call people to respond in Tampa and wherever. Joel, take it from here, and Troy down in Orlando right now. Every one of you that is ready to come follow Jesus, let's give God our resounding yes. I bless you. May the Lord keep you and shine on you in Jesus' name. Amen.